Hey everyone, my guest today is the Tony-nominated, multi-award-winning actor Christopher Fitzgerald. His Broadway credits include, as of today, Spamalot, Company, Waitress, and Act of God, Finian's Rainbow, Young Frankenstein, The Merchant of Venice, Amour, and Wicked. Recent TV and film credits include Happy, Godless, The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and Let Them All Talk. He is married to the actress and Broadway director extraordinaire Jessica Stone. I am so thrilled and honored. Christopher Fitzgerald, welcome to the podcast.
Well, hello. It's lovely to be here in your podcast.
It is in my podcast with special guest Christopher Fitzgerald.
Yeah,
Both of us
this
are
is exciting.
living in Brooklyn, but it would have been really easy to get together normally and do it in person. But there's a snowstorm for the first time in a long time in Brooklyn, New York, and it's beautiful,
Yeah,
but nice
it's
to be home.
beautiful. It looks lovely. I think they called school the day prior because I think they were nervous about the fact that we had a storm a couple of months ago that really shut down everything. And so our lovely mayor thought, why don't I shut it down prior to the snowstorm? And now it's just a lovely little snowstorm, and it's not, it's already on its way out. It's already turning into Brooklyn mush, the
Yeah,
kind of
it's now
brown.
just slush, and I felt like Carrie Bradshaw in the opening credits of Sex and the City today
Yeah.
as I stood on the street and got completely covered in mud. Also, there's this new thing now since COVID, because asynchronous learning and Zoom learning was a thing. There are no snow days of our childhood past. Now, don't worry, guys, we're just going to pivot to Zoom, and nothing is sadder.
I mean, the looks on my boys' faces this morning were just, it was, they were genuinely hurt, confused, and sad. As we were asking the question, like, when did you get the email for when the Zooms begin, and also what's on tap for your asynchronous learning and all of that jazz. And so they were definitely just hurt. And so both of them actually did go out and go sledding though. So I think that's a positive.
I think that's an important thing as a parent to
Yeah.
honor the sanctity of a snow day. And speaking of snow days, you, my friend, grew up in Maine, Maine,
Yes, I
America.
did. Yep.
So, like, what were winters like in your childhood?
Well, I remember, I just remember growing up in Maine. The thing that happens is it's a beautiful place. It's a beautiful place to grow up. It was really, uh, I loved it. I loved being near the water. I loved all the character that growing up in the Portland area provides in terms of seafaring stuff. And I ate lobster all the time. And you really get in. You become a Maina. You really do kind of step into that world. I did, at least. I have a funny little anecdote about that, if you want, in a minute. But
What, you're going to make us wait? All
I'm
right.
gonna make you wait. I'm gonna make you wait. If you remind me, I'll tell you in a minute, and it,
Okay.
it will be satisfying. But the thing that goes on in Maine is every the winter season is just really elongated. So it really starts in middle December. You're kind of you get this feeling of it's very dark at 2 p.m. and it doesn't really let up until like May. It's just like it's constantly raining, snowing, and freezing cold for a really long time. That's what I just remember being like, God, is it ever gonna get nice? And then when it gets nice, it's unbelievable. The summers in Maine are just unbelievable, but it lasts about 3 weeks.
They're
And then you're
hard earned. This is crazy. I wonder if you happen to have like an anecdote about this very subject.
like, well, the anecdote would be more about when I was in high school, we traveled. Growing up in Maine is just so fascinating because there's also a lot of character in terms of the people there. I think because of these elongated periods of cold, people don't. I think for years and generations in Maine, you don't spend a lot of time talking to each other. You don't spend a lot of time. There's a lot of kind of, and the accent is very clipped. It's very like it's very short, and you just say what you need to say, and you're a person of very few words. Yeah, you betcha. All right now. There's a kind of and people who are from Maine have this really how do I put it? They're very proud. They're very proud people. And so I went to a basketball game on Vinyl Haven Island, which is about an hour and a half off the coast. Beautiful, very remote. A lot of people in the summer, but in the winter, there's a couple of diehards that live out there. There's a community that lives out there. But they're far out. And this was before cell phones and before anything connected us all. And so my basketball team went out. And by the way, you think about me in basketball. I play Broadway's like little creatures. I play munchkins, leprechauns, um, humpbacks. That's kind of my MO in my work on Broadway for sure. And so you're kind of, I watched you when I said basketball. I watched your head just tilt just a little. Yes, I was on the end of the bench. There was one game I played 1 second. It was like the ball
Was
went
that
out.
such a
The
great
ball went,
day?
it was incredible. The ball went out of bounds. The coach was like, Kiffer. It was like my nickname was Kiffer growing up because I couldn't say Christopher. I would say Kiffer when I was really little. That became my nickname in high school, Kiffer. But in Maine, you say Kiffer. Kiffer, you're in. And I ran in like somebody passed the ball in. Immediately the ball went in. The buzzer sounded and I went and sat back down. So anyway, we travel out. The fun thing for me was being on the team and doing things like this, like traveling around the state, playing other schools, things like that. So we went to this Vinyl Haven Island. It was so far away that we had to spend the night in people's homes on the island. And so I slept with this family, and they had brought a VCR from the mainland, and they brought the movie Canine with Jim
Wait,
Belushi. It
wait,
was like a
wait.
big deal. Yeah.
Christopher, hang on 1 second. When you say I slept with this family, you had a host family.
Yeah, so yeah, I did not sleep with them. I did not have.
You weren't bunking directly like in, right?
No, we didn't have relations. I
Yes.
was sleeping
Hosted
in their house.
by,
I was hosted by this lovely family. There we go. Who
understood.
I also had sex with all of them. So no, um, no, I was hosted by this lovely family. They brought from the mainland a VCR and Canine. I have such a specific memory of Canine the movie with Jim Belushi, and everybody gathered to watch. And I went into the kitchen, and I remember the kitchen was like half of the floor of the kitchen was like dirt.
Mm.
It was like a dirt floor kitchen. It was so odd, and they didn't have a shower. They only had a bathtub. I remember. It was just a different way of life. And,
Exotic,
and
exotic to you.
the patriarch of the family, she was sitting in a rocking chair by a wood burning stove, and I sat down and I was talking to her, and she said to me, she was very, pure Mainer, and she said, "So you, where are you from, honey?" And I was like, "I'm from Portland. I'm from the Portland area." And she was like, "So, are you Mainer?" And I was like, "Yeah, I've grown up here my whole life." She was like, "But were you born here?" And I said, "Actually, no, I was not born in Maine. I was born in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania, but I moved here, right after I was born." And she goes, "Well, then you're not a Mainer, are you?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't know about that." And she said, "Honey, just because a cat crawls in the oven and has kittens, you don't call them biscuits, do you?"
No, no, ma'am, you don't.
It was delicious. And then I was like, and then I think I remarked, like, "Oh, your accent is really incredible." And she went, "Oh, I don't have an accent, darling. You do." I just remember
And
that.
that
And
woman
there's Maine for you.
turned out to be
Yeah. That was
Uda,
Susan Birkenhead, the lyricist.
Uda Hagen.
Uda Hagen.
Susan Birkenhead. Yes,
Anyway.
yes,
Those
represented
are
on
like,
Broadway.
yeah, that's my
So
little main
listen,
anecdote.
I guess I just have to skip right to Wicked because let's be honest, really, that's what the people are. I'm here for Maine. they're
Yeah,
here for. How did you go from like that story, that world, that kind of I don't know, smaller vision of the world, right? Which is
sure.
it's very I don't know, it's a lot of winter. It's an occasional trip to Vinyl Haven. Obviously, at some point, somebody realized if it wasn't self-started that you're one of the funniest, most talented, can sing, can do all the things that have made you the star that you are today. But like, it's not like you went from I don't know, you didn't go from Barcelona to New York. I mean, Maine and New York City, there's access. But how did you make this jump from the world that you grew up in to New York City?
Yeah. Wow. The just practically, I had some exposure to New York because my aunt, my mom's sister, Aunt KK, I called her, Karen, was worked at the American Lung Association. So this was be in the 70s, and early 80s, and she was a like a vice president there. And so we would come and travel here every now and then. So New York had this kind of mystique, mysterious feeling for me. I just remember trash in the streets. That's just like the thing I remember growing up was, wow,
Right.
there's so much trash in the streets. Um, so New York wasn't, but it also represented this giant like Oz. I mean, it was like this
Hmm.
other world that was so different than the world I was living in. I don't know how it kind of all I can say is my parents were divorced. I was kind of crazy and I think working through a lot of stuff, had a lot of energy. And my mom put me into a clown class at age 5, where I began with this guy, Sam Kilborn, where I started juggling and started learning clowning and that kind of stuff. And there was at that time in the late 70s, early 80s, there was all this access to kind of, there was this like vaudeville revival. People were doing storytelling, people were doing juggling stuff all throughout New England. And I just kind of started to hook up with these strange people where I could exercise whatever this thing was, that this unique thing. Um, and then did like community theater musicals, did and then did some plays, and just like I think where what's interesting about me in that journey forward was it was a true variety of stuff. I never really settled on one thing. I mean, I sang with like an a cappella group in high school that we created called the Acapella Fellas. And made our own and did it professionally for 2 summers, going around to festivals and just weird stuff, man. Like just ran, but I also fell in love with singing then. Then singing wasn't about singing lessons. I just sang because I love singing with my friends. And
Yeah.
so my access to that joy, I just kept trying to find things that brought me joy, I guess. And just like sparked my imagination and joy. And so it was like did vaudeville stuff. I did a cappella singing. I did traditional, I played Winthrop Peru in Music Man. Um, I did like this crazy thing where I did a play. What was it? All My Sons. I did All My Sons at a college, and the college then went to a college festival where they were competing against other productions. And one of the adjudicators of that festival was a woman named Mary Lynn Henry, who at that time in the 80s was a huge casting director for ABC. And she saw me and she said during the adjudication, she's like, I love this little kid. I would love to bring you to New York at some point. I think I could, she gave me her card, called me a couple weeks later, had this audition. My parents flew me to New York on People's Express. And that's where you used to pay for your flight mid-flight. They would go down the aisle with a credit
It's
card
like
thing.
Amtrak, but in the sky.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Uh, and then I did this like TV show on ABC on a Friday night, like that I played this big part in this thing. Then they said, do you want to stay in New York and keep doing that? And I said, no. And I went back and I was on a soccer team. I was on the basketball team. I just did all sorts of stuff. And then it was like, and then I graduated from high school and I went to college in Florida. Why? I don't know. They had a great brochure and a scholarship for people who wanted to do theater at this one college. Incredible lucky break to get money to study what I loved. So I got to do that. And then I went to Williamstown Theater Festival from a recommendation. So then it's just like, I bounced around to so
Wow.
many things and so I think that when I approach work now, I just have all of these like, it's like toolbox of just weird, eccentric shit that I draw upon for all the things that I do. When I'm playing somebody like Patsy in Spam-A-Lot, there's a kind of clowning-esque approach that I take. When I'm, and it goes right back to that 5-year-old kid who's just like, what tickles me about this moment, or what little could I do that can get the biggest impact, or what makes me laugh about this relationship with this person, or how can I use this prop as a and find some kind of twisted, interesting way that it opens up something in the story. I don't know. It's just like that's basically what happened, I guess. Does that make
Well,
sense?
yes, I believe it
It
tracks. It
makes
all
no sense
tracks.
and it makes sense.
It makes sense. Sure. So your wife, Jessica Stone, who has become one of like the most beloved, successful Broadway directors after having been and is an extraordinary actress as well, also, talks about Williamstown is really like a incredibly important part of her beginnings as an artist. Is that where you guys met?
We did not meet there. No,
So how did you meet Jessica?
we met doing Babes in Arms at Encores, the Encore series. I saw a poster recently where it showed all the programs in chronological order from the very beginning of Encores to today. And it's crazy because like we're in the second line of like all these lines. So it was a long time ago. It was 20, our anniversary is actually tomorrow. Our anniversary is Valentine's Day, where we went on our first date. It was the closing night of Babes in Arms. When
That's
we went on.
incredible. Do you
Isn't that
remember where you
wild?
went? Do you have any idea where you went?
Of course, I know. I mean, it was like I know exactly every detail. We went to the Red Eye Grill up the street from City Center, and we were with a couple of people, and we started kind of holding hands under the table. That's what I remember. That was like the
That
first
is
like, oh, something's happening.
I can feel that like when a showmance goes public, even just public for you, when you
Yeah,
leave like the rehearsal room or the dressing room area or the
yeah,
stage, you're outside. There is non-theater air and you are
that's a great way to put it. Yeah,
right, and you're in a restaurant with the people you work with and you are holding hands under the table. I think that's like one of the greatest feelings on the planet. Like there's just something
100%.
about taking it from inside to outside, and everyone in your cast probably knew, rooted. Do you think they
Yeah,
knew
I think
a
I
little
think a
bit?
couple
Yeah.
people. I was like Matt McGrath was in it, and I kept being like, I think she's cute. I think I might. And he was like, do it, go. Kevin Cahoon too. I was
Oh
like, Kevin,
God.
no, I think he was in it. I know we were like, you see pictures of us. I'm not kidding. We look like we're about 14 years
Well,
old.
you were babies in arms, actually,
We
when you
were
really
babies.
look at it.
But it's so cute to see Kevin now because he was there for that. And so we just have this bond of that time. And when he sees Jessica and I together, I can't imagine what that is like when he's just like, oh, and now she's cast him in a bunch of shows that she's directed. I've worked with him subsequently. It's like the best. This is what makes it so fun to do this sometimes.
Yeah, well,
Sometimes.
that's when it can seem like a really big world and it's such a tiny community at the same
Yeah.
time. And I think it's what allows so many of us to sort of live in New York because it has a village feeling because you're in this sort of very tiny work community in a
Yeah.
very big city. But you have really like, I mean, I think about all of those Broadway credits that I read. So was Wicked your first Broadway show?
Wicked was not my first. Amour was the
Amour
first.
happened before Wicked.
Happened before Wicked. Yeah.
And were
Um,
you with Wicked all of its like previous? No, you started in New York with
I
it.
started in New York with it and on Broadway. The interesting story about that maybe is that
I was
I
on
had
the
worked.
bench and Joe Mantello was like, come in for 1 second. Yeah,
Kind of. This is
kind of.
you're kind of right.
All
I had
right.
done play directed by Joe at Manhattan Theater Club called Corpus Christi, which you could do a whole other podcast about.
Yes,
Um, and I don't, you were here at that
I
time.
was
Yeah, it
here. Yeah.
was an incredible experience to do a play that, people actually protested and
Yes.
felt had very strong feelings about. The idea that the written word could elicit such
We
passion was
should do that, by the way. That's a great idea.
absolutely,
And
yeah.
get as many of you together as possible. Okay,
Oh, so we did.
let's
So
put a
I did
pin
the
in that.
play. So I had worked with Joe, and so I couldn't go out to San Francisco with the show for I don't remember what reason, but he had offered it to me to come to New York when it came to New York, and so it was coming to New York. But Jessica and I had asked her to marry me, and we were getting married in that summer that they were starting rehearsals. Not just when they were starting rehearsals, they were starting rehearsals the next. Like we got married on Saturday, and like Monday or Tuesday they began rehearsals for the Broadway production. And went to Joe and I said, I have a honeymoon plan. We're going to Greece and like we have this whole thing. I don't know what to do. And he said, okay, why don't you guys go on your honeymoon and you'll just join the show when you come back. So Jessica and he was at our wedding. Joe came to our wedding. I then went to the very first day of a table read, and then I left for like 10 days and then came back. Isn't that amazing? He knew Jessica too, because
Can
he
I
had,
tell you how
it's
amazing that
crazy.
is? Let me tell you how amazing that is. When I got married to my husband, Dominic Famusa, he was doing Take Me Out, directed by Joe Mantello. And Joe was like, you can have 5 minutes for your honeymoon.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I think we just lucked out.
No,
I think
I think
we
he likes
lucked
you
out.
better. He likes you better. Maybe because it was rehearsal and not actually in production. I'd like to think that maybe that was why he was less generous in the timing. But
Also, I think it was the part and the show. It was like, Bach he shows up every now and then, but there's I think when you're mounting a giant Broadway musical, like I think he just was kind of like, I'll just make, I won't even notice that you're not there, basically. That's the
because
way it's done.
you're on the bench except for 1 second
Yeah.
of the game. So, how quickly did you realize? And also, it's so meta and full circle. Like, I'm talking to you a couple of days after the Super Bowl, where we just saw the trailer for the Wicked movie. You
No,
are
right?
in a Broadway show called Spamalot with Ethan Slater, who plays your role in the film. Like, it is so iconic, this moment on so many levels.
True.
Even though
Even at a
this,
moment it was Ethan and I were talking in the hallway and Alex Brightman walked up and
yeah,
we were like, because Alex Brightman was the longest running Bach. He played Bach the longest on Broadway. And so the three
unbelievable.
of us are looking at each other. And by the way, it's rare to like that we all can just kind of look across at each other as opposed to having to look up. It's like three little short character guys all
Very
going like,
comforting. Very
yeah, we're,
comforting. Yeah,
what were they saying? Alex made some joke about some Bach on Bach, or I don't know, some kind of, we should do 54 below, like some Bach reunion or something. I don't remember. Anyway, it's true. And the power of that show. It's just unreal. But, every now and then I've had this moment, a couple of times where I've been involved in something where I had a premonition about it's what was going to happen. I knew the story. I saw the story before it happened. And Wicked was one of those. It just was like something, it just felt very special. In Not in terms of, what's interesting is it opened and the reviews were very mediocre. Um, it was it, it was the critical response was very different than what the response we were getting from the people in the audience. And I just had this thought. I was like, this is going to be something really special. I just knew it from watching Kristen sing Popular and Adina sing Defying Gravity. It was just like, what is going on? This is incredible. They're so
yeah,
good.
yeah,
This was like such a right fit. And I felt interested in this this idea of a prequel. It was the first of its kind, really. It was this idea of taking an iconic story that we all know and then giving us this kind of background to it was such a cool idea at the time. And so it's just, but it, and then I thought, oh, they're gonna someday they'll make a movie about this. And then it like took forever. I mean, 21 years, but here we are. And it was like I watched the trailer and it was marvelous and just
Yeah.
overwhelming, kind of overwhelming, actually.
Has
Uh,
Ethan, I mean, I don't know how much you can share, but has he sort of shared anything with you about what the experience of making it was? Was it, I imagine it was difficult and joyous and all sorts of things. It's so big.
I think he had a ball. I think
Yeah,
that's my only impression is that he just had a ball doing it. Um, and felt like the director had such a cool vision and each day was filled with just new kind of surprises as terms of like what he was going to do. But like he and I he had reached out to me and we had just talked a little bit. It's funny. It's like, there's not a lot in the Broadway musical, there's not a lot to explore in the character, but
right.
what we could share was really cool and a perspective like it's just cool. And I told him the story of how on my first entrance I one day with Kristen I literally fell down the whole set of stairs onto the deck. um just funny little things that we could share about that.
Hurting ourselves.
Yeah, hurting ourselves.
Funny things about hurting, about the show must go on no matter what,
Yeah.
which is a whole other conversation. I imagine you felt that way about Waitress also. I mean, Company, no brainer in terms of its iconic nature, and you knew every song would be incredible. But Waitress too, like,
Here's
that is
the same thing though. I was at the very, very first reading of it in an apartment, in a producer's apartment, and there was only like three or four of us actors that they had brought just to read the screenplay from the movie, basically, the printed out
right.
screen. And then Sarah sat at a piano and sang songs that she had written, and she had placed them in different spots. And I just remember by the time she finished um whatever the iconic song is,
Used
why
to
can't
be
I think of it?
mine.
But yes, used to be mine. I had a whole vision. I was like, this is like I see it. I see exactly what's going to happen. And then what happened is exactly what I thought. I just knew people were going to take to this story. And again, it wasn't like it was a critical like home run, but I just knew people were gonna just have such a good experience living with these characters. And I could just it was I felt like I was at the beginning of something really special, and it turned out really special.
So
So
special. I mean, I think about car rides I've taken, and it's like Company, Waitress, and Wicked are such, like, you've been with us and my family, like, as we're biking around Paris or driving to Maine. It's really like an incredible thing. What a like huge part of the fabric of our audio lives you are. And here you are. You actually are in Spamalot right now. And I know exactly, I saw the Spamalot the first time because it was 20 years ago. It was the first thing I saw after having a new baby. And that child is
oh,
Georgia, who's 20 right now. So it's so that show, I mean, I'm such a Monty Python fan. That show is so hilarious. It is so silly. It is so joyous and silly. All of you, I know there's been some cast changes since I saw it on opening night. But it was perfection. It was really one of the most fun openings I've ever been to. Um, including Vanessa Williams joining you guys. But how do you, like, with a cast as funny and skilled and generous as this cast is, like, how do you get through rehearsal, like with a clock, like we actually have to get this much done today? How did you guys, or when you're working, maybe this is my question. I get to see like the silliest, funniest, most perfectly fine-tuned comedic brilliance when I see the show. How much like stop and start and really working bits, or was this kind of organic from day one?
it's a good question. I guess my take on the material was um I wasn't sure. I did not see the original. And
Okay.
so I wasn't sure kind of what it was
Like
yet
what the
until
tone is, what it is.
I
Yeah.
really didn't quite get it. But very quickly, um, the so if you look at the movie and they're all covered in mud and like there's a lot of the fun in the movie, I believe, is the juxtaposition of the way they speak, the kinds of situations they're in, and the kind of uh, conundrums they're speaking about in this environment that is so disgusting and depraved and like filled with violence and
Right.
horrifying and death.
Like
Bring out,
real
it's
medieval.
hilarious, but
Yeah.
it's like they actually have just it's so gross and so it's like how does that translate to the Broadway? Like how do you can you get
How do
that
you do
same
that?
kind of grit in but what they released that idea altogether in the Broadway show, and instead they bring in actual Broadway glitz and glamour. So it's almost like the whole thing just went whoop. It's like
Hmm.
the kind of gross part just went up a bit, and then the Broadway glitz and glamour aspect of it really sells it as a show. And that whole like when that orchestra starts, but it's so joyous, it's so kick-ass that that juxtaposition with then like I'm not dead yet. All of those things just allow for that fun tension, I think. And then in rehearsal, the way it's so well crafted, and it's more like these kind of sketches that kind of lead you along, and they're so well crafted that you could kind of just put them on and mean what you say, and they come alive. It wasn't hard to
Hmm.
find the funny in a great, in wonderfully constructed little comedic scenes. It's just, I think the thing that became challenging is making sure that you're not overdoing it, that you can trust in the material, that like, I came in with this kind of whole idea that I wanted to Patsy to be like a radar to
To
the
King
king.
Arthur. Yeah.
Anyone who doesn't understand the reference, Radar was a character in MASH, which was a famous TV show and movie. And this character, Radar, is the right hand man to the general on the base, and he just always knows what he always anticipates what the general needs is going to say or needs, and always has the things right there. So I had a kind of all these ideas, and some of them made it into the show, but so many of them I was like, no, throw it away, throw that out. Oh, that no, or I could do maybe just a hint of it, but you just don't need it. It plays so well already. And so, and I've never really hopped on to a comedy where I felt like we all were so supportive of each other, so in the same world, and it just really clicked. Our personalities clicked as a team, and we just had a ball serving each other up. There was you never really sensed that anyone was just kind of pushing everyone aside to get to
Yeah.
the front. It really was like a kind of volley and serve. It just like kept going and
That is
going, and
so great.
really
And
special.
I
It really
guess
was.
what about like everyone is so funny? Um, how do you, are you someone who breaks on stage or are you really good at keeping it together?
I'm really good at keeping it together. Every now and then, and the problem with me is if I do break, I almost can't recover.
You're
So
out.
like I've had some awful moments of just like almost like crying and having to leave
Right.
stage.
It's so
Um,
painful.
like so overwhelmed with like what's happening. But for the most part, and I almost pride Patsy, the character, on always just observing and really not having a take on what's going on. Because I feel like I want to save that moment for that song when he says, "I'm not alone." And you finally really feel Patsy's inner thinking in that moment. You don't really get a lot of it until that moment where he's like, I'm standing here this whole time, so I like to just be very observant and neutral and really just taking in what's going on. And
And
so
it's
that
moving. It's really moving. Like in the midst of this chaos and hilarity. Chaos, not in terms of it being the most finely crafted show, but chaos in that there are a lot of people and the
Yeah.
Lady of the Lake running around
Yeah.
and doing hilarious things
Yeah.
in order to, they're there to solve they're there to find something, and there's a
Yeah.
quest, and everyone is on the same quest, and the audience is just so happy to have a relief from like real life for a while. It's just
Sure.
really an incredible moment to get to have this
Yeah.
show. Christopher, I could keep you here forever, but I'm going to have you back. But I do want to ask you if there's a little known fact about you that you can share before I let you go.
A little known fact about me.
Mhm.
Oh, goodness gracious. I feel so on the spot, and it's like I want to think of something interesting and something that's a little known fact. My gosh, now I feel so boring. I feel like I have nothing that's interesting
Do you have a
about me.
really boring fact about you?
Okay. It's all the thing that keeps coming into my head that is going to be the thing I'm going to say is
Yes.
so weird and so I keep trying to push that one away and find some other thing. But the real thing is I'm
Yeah.
kind of obsessed with hands.
With hands?
With hands. I notice people
Hands.
hands, your hands. I notice people's hands when I start a job or when I go in and meet somebody or when I'm having coffee. I am always interested in how people's hands look,
Huh.
their structure, where the nail bed is. It's just something that I
Like
have
from a young
always,
age, like always.
always from when I was little, just interested in looking at people's hands. And I
That's
like try
so
to draw hands.
interesting.
Uh, so there it is. A
That's
little,
amazing.
that's a really
My
little.
nephew just decided he's a surgeon to become a hand, like that's going to be his specialty. Like you're not alone.
He and I could just chat for
Yes.
hours.
The hand podcast. I can't wait to listen to that. Um, Mr. Fitzgerald, you are just the most delightful human. Thank you for years and years, decades of work that has just been so inspiring and satisfying and life
Right
altering for
back at you.
many.
Right back at you.
Thank you. Have a great show tonight. And until
Right.
next time,
Oh, I love
bye.
chatting with you. Bye.
Please come back. Please come back.
Okay.
All right.